Hey y'all, welcome to the fish room. Gonna give you a quick tour around the place. There's the display tank, the sump underneath that. Next to that we have the frag tank and refugium. We'll make a little bit of water over here in the corner of the room. Back behind the display tank, we got a couple media reactors. We'll run carbon and purigen out of these two. And there's a UV sterilizer, algae scrubber, auto top off down there. But what I wanted to talk about was the control panel / cabinet that I put together here. Houses all the pump controllers and Apex equipment. We'll start at the top here. This is a touch screen, excuse me. It's been real responsive, even with wet fingers. It works really well. Been real happy with that. The front of the cabinet does have gray glass, so it is just slightly tinted, enough to knock down the brightness of the LED some. The very top, the 4 MP40s there are for the 4 MP40s on the display tank. There's those two. And then 2 more down here on the opposite end. These 2 MP40 controllers are for the frag tank. So there's an MP40 that lives on either side of it. And then the final quiet drive controller here is for the Vectra L2, which is the return pump for the whole system. And then next to the Vectra controller is the skimmer pump controller. It's a Skims SM257. It's the 4th Skims I've had. Been real happy with them. This guy's been running about a week. And as you can see, already starting to pull out some pretty nasty stuff there. It worked well. Underneath the pump controllers is the Apex EL brain. It is an EL, so it doesn't have the VDM ports or salinity probe connection, but I felt like I got a free energy bar with it, so I went ahead and bought that one. When I was sanding out the panel, the front panel of the cabinet here, I kind of messed up this hole, so I had Modular Marine cut me a little trim panel to cover up my mistake, and it actually came out looking really, really well. I was real happy with the way that looked. Next to the Apex brain are 3 switches. These are actuator controls. The middle switch here turns the actuator power supply on. We have lots of nieces and nephews that stop by, so wanted to keep that relatively child-proof. The switch on the left here controls the lights above the display tank. So can move those up and down. It is a double throw switch. And then the switch here on the right controls the lights above the frag tank. So I'm able to move those up and down as well too. I was initially a little worried about the reliability of the actuators, but I've definitely put them through their paces and they're working well. Below those switches are the modules for the Apex. On the left side here are 3 VDM modules. Those originally controlled the photon lights, but I was having an issue with the Apex controllers and those lights. So for the meantime, I've gone back to their original wireless controller while I troubleshoot the issue some more. In the middle here are two FMM modules. So there are 5 leak sensors. 4 of them live in the room itself, and there's 1 that lives in the attic. There are also 2 optical sensors in the auto top off. 1 optical sensor tells the solenoid in the corner over there that the box needs more water. And then there's a second optical sensor that tells the system that there's no more water left in the auto top off in case it never refills. It protects the pump that lives inside that top off chamber. And then there's a third optical sensor that's also part of the top off system that lives in the return pump section here. I did leave a blank little section here in case I needed to add a few more modules or whatever. There's no telling what cool piece of gear might come out that I need to mount in this cabinet. Below that is the reed switch. So when these 2 halves connect, the switch closes, and that's what allows me to turn the LED lights on and off. There's all sorts of cool little programming tricks you can do with switches and the Apex. Some real interesting logic built in there. There are 2 energy bars built into the cabinet. They live here at the very bottom of the tank, of the cabinet, excuse me. All the cables are labeled. If there is an emergency, and I do have to unplug something fast, my inclination is going to be to go for the power cable, not for the touchscreen up there. So I want everything nice and neatly labeled. Now this panel does simply pop down, and you can see where all the wiring enters the cabinet. There's a Vortec extension cable back there. But this is where all the pump controllers, most of the Apex peripherals that are outside this cabinet come in here. And that just attaches with Velcro. Below that, there's a slit in the conduit where all the wiring enters the cabinet. Now behind, let's take a look what's going on in here. Start back at the top again. One of the very first things I added to the cabinet are some exhaust fans. So these guys blow out the hot air. And then down here is another set of fans. These guys suck in cool air and also blow off the hot air that's coming off the energy bars below. All right. Below the fans, I have a computer keyboard. The monitor is a touchscreen, but of course, sometimes you have usernames and passwords that need to be entered. Can't always use a keyboard. Behind the keyboard are the 6 MP40 power supplies, all labeled. There's also the Vectra L2 supply with a Dell power supply in front of it. Below those power supplies, I've got 2 Apex breakout boxes. The box on the left here has 5 float switches attached to it. They come out down here. One of the things I'm currently working on right now is the dosing setup. So I've got one of the Versa pumps attached. I've got 4 more to attach to that base station. And then float switches inside those dosing containers connect to this, so I know when those liquids are low. The 6th switch connected to that breakout box is from a Davy Jones locker, so I know when the skim aid is getting full. and I still need to get that set up. The switch is in place, but the locker is not. The breakout box on the right has several of the reed switches for the system connected to it that turn all the LED lights on and off automatically. Next to the breakout boxes is the switch power supply. The switch is just a Ubiquiti Unify. It's the uplink to the main home network. This is the new Apex. This is the Dell computer. This is my old Apex Classic, and then there is one PoE camera in the room right now that monitors the 150 gallon system that's in the room. There will be another 3 PoE cameras that monitor the new 450 gallon system, so I can keep an eye on things. Next to that switch is the SCIMS power supply. And below the SCIMS is the power supply for the actuators. Here's where those actuator controls come in from the attic. And there's also a leak sensor probe that lives in the pan underneath the hot water heater up there. And there's also a power strip in here that the computer and monitor and a couple things that just need constant power are connected to. Below or next to that is the Dell Optiplex mini desktop. Runs really well, and that of course drives the touchscreen monitor at the top of the cabinet. You can see here where more of the wiring enters the cabinet. And of course there's a large umbilical that runs over to the door. So at the top here you have all the pump controllers. Push through. There's some vent holes for the Vectra power supply. You of course have the Apex brain mounted to a piece of wood there. The actuator switches, and then all the wiring for the Apex modules lives on the back of this door. In the middle here, I of course had to build the cabinet around some of the plumbing for the system. So this is the backup drain for the refugium, and this is the primary drain, and then this is the return from the system manifold to the frag tank. Of course there's a LED power supply over there and a couple magnetic latches that keep this panel closed when not in use. And then one more recent addition is a couple 1200 watt UPSs. When the LED lights are full blast and the 600 watt heaters are on, there's about 1,000 watts being pulled off of each 15 amp circuit. So I have the heater split up and the rest of the electronics of the system split up pretty well, so that power is evenly distributed across those two 15 amp circuits. But there's a little emergency power available till the generator starts up. Anyway, thanks for looking, y'all. I'll definitely keep you updated. Thanks again.